The genius who designed the perfect drug smuggling boat never meant to arm America's most notorious cocaine cowboys with their ultimate weapon. This maritime hero built speedboats for presidents, kings, and law enforcement agencies, creating vessels that could dance across choppy seas at 90 miles per hour. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Those same revolutionary designs became the backbone of the billion-dollar drug trade, turning Miami's waters into a high-speed chess match between cops and smugglers, both riding identical boats built by the same man. Don Aronow didn't start life as a boat designer. He was a Brooklyn construction guy who made his fortune building tract homes in New Jersey during the 1950s housing boom. Born on March 3, 1927 to a middle-class Jewish family, Aronow had that restless energy that marks truly dangerous visionaries. After selling his construction business for what would be millions in today's money, he moved to Miami in 1959, supposedly to retire at the ripe old age of 32. But retirement and Don Aronow went together like oil and water. Within months of hitting Miami, he discovered offshore powerboat racing, a sport that combined three of his favorite things: speed, danger, and showing off. The problem was, the boats available at the time were about as sophisticated as floating bathtubs with outboard motors slapped on the back. They pounded through waves like hammers, rattling your teeth loose and occasionally launching drivers into the stratosphere when they hit a wave wrong. Aronow looked at these primitive racing boats and saw opportunity. Using his construction knowledge and an almost supernatural understanding of hydrodynamics, he started Formula Marine in 1962. His first creation, the Formula 233, wasn't just an improvement, it was a revolution wrapped in fiberglass. The secret was something called a deep V hull design, which Aronow refined to perfection. Instead of slapping across waves like traditional flat-bottom boats, his hull sliced through them like a hot knife through butter. Here's something to get your engines revving. If you stick around, you'll discover how one man's obsession with going fast on water accidentally created the most successful criminal enterprise tool of the 1980s. And trust me, the story gets wilder than a Miami Vice episode, so hit that subscribe button and buckle up for this ride. Let's talk about what made Aronow's design so special, because understanding the technical magic is key to grasping why drug runners fell in love with these boats harder than Tony Montana loved his little friend. The deep V hull wasn't entirely Aronow's invention. A designer named Ray Hunt had pioneered the concept, but Aronow took Hunt's idea and pushed it to extremes nobody thought possible. Traditional boat hulls have relatively flat bottoms, which work great when the water's calm, but turn into torture devices when things get choppy. Imagine riding a sheet of plywood across a field of speed bumps at 60 miles per hour. That's what most boats felt like in rough water. Aronow's deep V hulls had sharp angles that cut down from the sides to meet at a knife edge along the center line, typically at 24 degrees or steeper. This design meant the boat carved through waves instead of bouncing over them, but here's where Aronow's genius really showed. He didn't just copy the deep V design, he perfected the weight distribution, the center of gravity, and the running surface to create boats that were stable at insane speeds. His boats could maintain incredible speeds in 6-foot seas, conditions that would have most boats either airborne or underwater. The hulls also featured lifting strakes. These longitudinal ridges that looked like racing stripes but actually helped the boat get up on plane faster and stay stable during high-speed turns. The typical Aronow boat ranged from 24 to 39 feet, hitting that sweet spot between being small enough to be nimble and large enough to be seaworthy. They were powered by twin engines, usually massive Mercury or Mercruiser blocks pushing out 400 to 500 horsepower each. When you fired up both engines on a cigarette boat, it sounded like God himself clearing his throat. Aronow didn't just build one successful boat company, he built 5 of them, selling each one and immediately starting another like some kind of nautical serial entrepreneur. After Formula came Don Z Marine in 1964, named after himself, Don Z, get it? Don Z boats became the Ferraris of the water, sleek and impossibly fast. Then came Magnum Marine in 1966, building boats that looked like they should be carrying James Bond to his next mission. But the crown jewel of Aronow's empire was Cigarette Racing Team, founded in 1969. The name itself was perfect, dangerous, slightly illicit, and undeniably cool. Cigarette boats became the ultimate status symbol in Miami, where having the fastest boat meant more than having the biggest house. These weren't just boats, they were 35-foot middle fingers to physics, capable of screaming across the ocean at speeds that made Coast Guard cutters look like they were standing still. Here's a fact that'll blow your mind faster than twin turbos on a calm day. Aronow sold cigarette boats to George H.W. Bush, to King Hussein of Jordan, and to dozens of other world leaders and powerful figures. At the same time, those exact same models were being bought by mysterious cash buyers who'd show up at the factory with duffel bags full of $100 bills. Nobody asked questions, because in 1970s Miami, asking questions was bad for your health. Now here's where our story takes a left turn into the shadows. The 1970s saw the rise of cocaine trafficking from Colombia through the Caribbean into Florida, and suddenly there was more drug money flowing through Miami than sand on South Beach. The Drug Enforcement Administration estimated that by 1980, 70% of all cocaine entering the United States came through South Florida. And guess what those enterprising Colombian entrepreneurs needed? Fast boats that could outrun the Coast Guard. Aronow's designs were literally perfect for drug smuggling, though he'd never intended them for that purpose. Think about what makes an ideal smuggling vessel. It needs to be fast enough to outrun law enforcement, stable enough to operate in rough seas at night, small enough to avoid radar detection, and reliable enough to make the 50-mile run from the Bahamas to Florida without breaking down. Cigarette boats checked every single box, like they were designed by Pablo Escobar himself. The boats could carry up to 2,000 pounds of cocaine, while still flying across the water faster than anything law enforcement had. Their shallow draft meant they could run up into the mangrove-lined creeks and canals of South Florida, where larger patrol boats couldn't follow. At night, painted black and running without lights, they were virtually invisible. The DEA called them go-fast boats, which might be the most understated nickname in law enforcement history. Before we dive into the wild world of the cocaine cowboys, make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell, because what comes next is stranger than fiction. We're about to explore how the same man sold boats to both the DEA and the drug dealers they were chasing, creating the most expensive game of cat and mouse ever played on water. Here's where Aronow's story gets complicated enough to make your head spin. In 1983, he founded USA Racing Team, specifically to build boats for the US Customs Service and other law enforcement agencies. The government needed boats that could catch the smugglers, and who better to build them than the man who designed what the smugglers were using? It was like hiring the guy who invented the bank vault to design the tools to break into it. The Blue Thunder boats that USA Racing Team built for customs were essentially militarized cigarettes. Same hull design, same performance envelope, but equipped with sirens, radios, and gun mounts. Aronow was literally selling boats to both sides of the drug war, though there's no evidence he did so knowingly or illegally. He was just a businessman meeting market demand, and if the market happened to include both cops and robbers, well, that was just the free enterprise system at work. The situation got so absurd that customs agents would chase drug runners in identical boats, sometimes boats that had rolled off Aronow's production line on the same day. It was like watching a NASCAR race where half the drivers were trying to arrest the other half. Veterans of the drug war tell stories of high-speed chases, where the only difference between the good guys and the bad guys was the paint job. If you watched Miami Vice in the 1980s, you saw Don Aronow's boats in almost every episode. The show didn't invent that world, it was documenting it. Aronow moved in circles that included legitimate businessmen, champion racers, celebrities, and people whose business cards might as well have said mysterious entrepreneur. This was Miami in the cocaine boom, where everyone knew everyone, and nobody asked where the money came from. Aronow's Thunder Alley, the stretch of Northeast 188th Street in North Miami Beach where he had his factories, was like the Silicon Valley of speed. On any given day, you might see a Saudi prince shopping for a yacht, a DEA agent picking up a patrol boat, and a guy with a briefcase full of cash looking for something fast and anonymous. The parking lot looked like a high-stakes poker game had collided with a boat show. The man himself was larger than life, standing 6 feet tall with the kind of charisma that could sell ice to Eskimos, or in his case, sell boats to people who had no business owning anything that fast. He'd take potential buyers out for test rides that were more like near-death experiences, hammering across Biscayne Bay at speeds that turned your internal organs into jelly. Most people would stumble off the boat, ready to sign anything just to make it stop. Aronow would just grin and ask if they wanted to go faster. As the drug trade exploded, so did demand for go-fast boats, creating an arms race between smugglers and law enforcement that pushed boat design to its limits. Smugglers started modifying Aronow's designs, adding extra fuel tanks for longer range, installing more powerful engines, and even experimenting with radar-defeating materials. Some boats were pushing 1,400 horsepower and hitting speeds over 100 miles per hour in open ocean, speeds that would have been considered impossible just a decade earlier. Aronow kept innovating too, developing Kevlar-reinforced hulls that could take more punishment, designing boats with even deeper V-angles for better rough water performance, and creating custom racing boats that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible on water. His 38-foot cigarette Top Gun became the ultimate expression of his design philosophy, a boat that could maintain blistering pace for hours, while lesser vessels would shake themselves apart. The technology transfer between racing and smuggling went both ways. Innovations developed for offshore racing found their way into smuggling boats within months, while techniques developed by smugglers to avoid detection influenced legitimate marine design. It was technological evolution at warp speed, driven by millions of dollars in drug money and the constant pressure of law enforcement. On February 3, 1987, Don Aronow was shot to death in his car on that famous stretch of Miami boat-building territory. Right in front of his office, in broad daylight, the killer walked up to Aronow's white Mercedes, fired several shots through the window, and disappeared. It was a professional hit, executed with the kind of precision that suggested this wasn't someone's first rodeo. The murder investigation read like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Potential motives included everything from a business deal gone wrong, to revenge from the drug world, to connections with covert government operations. The man eventually convicted of arranging the murder was Ben Kramer, a former powerboat racer and convicted drug smuggler who'd had business dealings with Aronow. But even today, many investigators believe Kramer was just a convenient fall guy and the real story goes much deeper. Some theories suggested Aronow had crossed the wrong people in the drug trade, either by cooperating with law enforcement or by knowing too much about who was buying his boats. Others pointed to his government contracts and suggested he'd gotten tangled up in covert operations that went way beyond simple boat building. There were whispers about connections to everything from CIA operations in Central America to money laundering schemes that reached into the highest levels of government. What we do know is that Aranau's death marked the end of an era. Thunder Alley gradually emptied out, the go-fast boat arms race slowed down as law enforcement finally got the upper hand, and the cocaine cowboys era came to its violent conclusion. But Aranau's designs lived on, refined and copied and modified by builders around the world who recognized genius when they saw it. Don Aranau's boats changed more than just powerboat racing. They changed the entire dynamic of maritime law enforcement, drug interdiction, and coastal security. Before Aranau, catching drug smugglers was largely a matter of intelligence and luck. After Aranau, it became a high-speed chase requiring specialized equipment, trained drivers, and boats that cost more than most people's houses. The DEA and Coast Guard had to completely reorganize their interdiction strategies, developing new tactics for high-speed pursuits, investing in helicopter support, and eventually turning to technology like radar and satellite surveillance because they simply couldn't catch the boats Aranau had made possible. The war on drugs became a technological arms race that cost billions of dollars, and it all started with one man's obsession with going fast on water. Today, cigarette racing still exists, building boats that would make Don Aranau's jaw drop. Modern cigarettes can hit 140 miles per hour, using space-age materials and computer-designed hulls that push the boundaries of physics even further. But they're built for wealthy enthusiasts and professional racers, not drug smugglers. Enhanced surveillance technology, international cooperation, and the shift of drug routes away from maritime trafficking have made the go-fast boat era a thing of the past. Here's the thing about Don Aranau that nobody really wants to admit. He probably knew exactly who was buying his boats and what they were being used for. You don't sell dozens of boats to cash buyers in 1980s Miami without having a pretty good idea of where that cash came from. But he also built boats for presidents and kings, for law enforcement and military special forces. He was the ultimate pragmatist, serving whoever could pay his price. Was he complicit in the drug trade? Legally, no. Morally? That's a grayer area than the Miami sky before a hurricane. He created the tools that made billions of dollars in drug trafficking possible, but he also created the tools that law enforcement used to fight back. He was an equal opportunity enabler, a man who believed that speed itself was neither good nor evil. It was just speed, and what people did with it was their own business. In the end, Don Aranau's story is really the story of American innovation taken to its logical extreme. He saw a need, going really fast on water, and he filled it better than anyone else. That his innovations enabled one of the most destructive criminal enterprises in American history was just an unfortunate side effect of excellence. Or maybe it wasn't unfortunate at all. Maybe it was inevitable that anything that good at evading authority would be used to evade authority. Don Aranau designed the perfect drug smuggling boat entirely by accident, creating vessels so good at what they did that they defined an entire era of American crime and law enforcement. His deep V hulls didn't just revolutionize powerboat racing. They revolutionized the drug trade, turning cocaine trafficking into a multi-billion-dollar industry that forever changed South Florida and America itself. The bitter irony is that Aranau's greatest success, creating boats that could outrun anything on the water, may have also led to his death. In a world where speed meant money and money meant power, the man who controlled speed became too dangerous to leave alive. His murder remains officially solved, but spiritually unsolved. A reminder that in the high-stakes world of boats and drugs and money, nobody gets out clean. So the next time you see a sleek powerboat cutting across the water, leaving a rooster tail of spray in its wake, remember Don Aranau, the Brooklyn kid who wanted to go fast and accidentally armed both sides of America's most expensive war. His boats were engineering marvels. His life was a Hollywood movie, and his death was a mystery that may never be fully solved. If you found this story as mind-blowing as a twin-turbo cigarette at full throttle, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and share this video with anyone who thinks they know the real story of Miami's cocaine cowboys, because sometimes the most interesting history is the stuff they don't teach you in school. Like how one man's need for speed changed the course of American criminal history forever. Until next time, keep your bow up and your engines running.